And welcome back. We are going to today take a closer look at how to use if statements with strings. We've already seen a couple examples of this, but we haven't really talked about it. We mostly have looked at numeric examples and how to use those. So when we talk about branching statements with strings, one of the things you have to understand when we look at our examples, we mostly have compared our strings in one simple way. This way has been to test for equality, to see if two strings are equal to one another. And the way we do this is with the equals method that is part of this string class. So anytime we use a string, we can use the equals method to say, hey, is one string equal to another string? So when we test two strings for equality, the two ways we can do that is with the equals method, or we can use the equals ignore case method. And now you'll notice in here when we compare strings, we're not using equals equals like we did if we have a numeric type. That's one of the biggest things to remember here, is that with a string, again, we're using dot equals and not a equals equals here. So with our first string example here with the equals method, we have str1 dot equals str2. And it doesn't matter what those values are for this example, because ultimately it's just going to compare those two strings, determine if they're equal, and if they are, it's going to say, hey, the two strings are equals. Else, it's going to say the two strings are not equal. Then we have str1 dot equals ignore case, and you'll see the two strings are equal, the two strings are not equal. Now, the only difference between these two variations is that the first one looks exactly at the strings. So uppercase, lowercase, if they are any kind of variation different, it will come back as not equal. Whereas the second one with the equals ignore case, if you hit, for example, we had a uppercase hello and a lowercase hello, we would find that those two strings are equal because they have the same characters in them regardless of casing. So it doesn't matter if they're uppercase or lowercase, they of course will be treated as equal with ignore case. Now, with that actual Boolean expression within there, if you look at either equals or you look at equals ignore case, the ultimate thing to look at is that you're comparing the first string to your second string. And you can replace that second string with any string you want to compare string 1 with. So, if you had, let's say, a third string, str3, you could put str3 in there and it'll still work. Additionally, we could also put any non-variable string in the expression, such as the word hello. So we could say str.equals hello. And that is something that could be very helpful. So for example, if we have a program that is going to do certain things when a certain word is entered, this is a great way for to do this. So for example, like when we get to working with loops, we might use a conditional statement to terminate the loop. And this could be one way they do it, is we could have a string like this, the dot equals, that says, hey, when you see this certain word, I want you to stop the loop. Now, if the two strings are equal, all right, then we say, hey, that expression is true. And that part of our conditional branch is executed. And just like we've seen with all of our other coding examples, when that happens, all the rest of the branching statements don't get executed. So as soon as it finds that true piece, it's going to complete it. Whether it's an if, an else if, or an else, it's going to do those pieces. Now, there are some other Boolean expressions for strings other than equals and equals ignore case. All right, these are, of course, probably the most common ones that you're going to see, but there are some other methods that belong to the string class that could be used in our code. Methods such as contains, ends with, is blank, is empty, etc. are all part of the Boolean type. And again, these are things that we haven't really seen as much, but they are things that could come up. And because we're just starting up right now with our programming, we're mostly going to concentrate on primarily using equals and using equals ignore case. It doesn't mean that we can't use the other ones, but for most of our testing purposes right now, these are going to be the main ones we're going to use for our strings. Now, later on, as we start getting further into our programming career, we start developing much more complex programs, you may find that you need to use some of these other methods to create an appropriate conditional. Like, for example, if you're looking to see if a string ends with a certain set of characters, you might use that ends with to see if it does contains that set of characters and then can take an appropriate action for it. All right, and if we go over to Eclipse, we can go ahead and take a look at a couple different examples of some conditionals here. So first here, we are testing two strings for equality. So we want to, of course, when we code these, we want to also make sure we're putting appropriate comments in here. So that's something we haven't talked about as much with our conditionals, but we want to start making so we have appropriate comments for these, because it's kind of the next level how we're doing our commenting. So instead of looking at each individual print line statement, for example, we can start moving up to, hey, we don't have to necessarily talk about each print line statement, but now we can start talking about our conditionals. So what does this conditional do here? Well, this is, of course, testing to see if string 1 and string 2 are equal. And then we can, of course, copy that, because again, we're going to go down here and we're doing the exact same thing, but we're ignoring case. All right. And down here we have one more, so we're testing to see if string 1 is equal to various inputs, all right, or strings. So now let's go ahead and run this through this. So we should see str1 is hello, str2 is hello, but with a capital H. So if we look at this first one, before we even run our code here, we have str1 equals str2. So we say, are these strings equal? Well, if we look, well, we can look at this and see these are not equal. So we should expect to see that these are not equal. Now down here we have our ignore case. Ignore case, remember, that means that the words can be the same and the cases can be different. So in this example, we should expect these to be the same. And then down here, we're going to say, guess the secret word. So we're playing a little word guessing game. So we're kind of almost doing a little bit of a game here. And so we say, hey, guess the secret word. And so we can say, hey, let's get a line from the user. And we're going to test to see if it equals a word here. And if it equals their input, if it does that. And then, of course, if they're not equal. All right, pretty cool. So what is that going to ultimately do for us? What are we going to be able to create with this? Are we going to be able to get into this one? Because of course we can see it's hello up here. So we may have to change this to, if we want, for example, to test this one. So let's go ahead and run this. And we say the strings are not equal. All right, that's what we expected. The strings are equal. Great. Guess the secret word. So let's go ahead and just put in, let's do hello with a capital O, just to make it a little tricky here. And we got the strings are equal, because guess where it fell? It fell right here into this first one. So that, of course, can be a little tricky because, if we are trying to get this secret word one, we may have to arrange that higher, because we may want to have that be higher in our code. And so that gets into a little conversation about better coding practices. So I'm actually going to move this to here, move my else if down. And so now this if is going to be equal to the input, and the strings are equal, I'm going to say, to the word hello, just so we can differentiate that. And so let's go ahead and change this just a little bit, though. I'm going to change this to an equals ignore case this time, just so that way we can make sure that we are seeing the right one. And so now if we run this, let's just go ahead and put in hello, all lowercase. We guess the secret word, awesome. But now let's see if we do this with an uppercase hello. Okay, so you guess the secret word again, no problem. Even if we do a variation of that, you'll notice we can get hello, capital O. Again, secret word. So this ignore case is very powerful. So if we ever want to hit this one right here, we'd have to change this back to just plain old equals in order for this to really effectively get to down here. And this one, we may, for example, maybe we want this to be equal hello with a capital H, all right? And so now if I go ahead and run this and I type hello, you can see we get the secret word. If I run it again, do hello with a capital H, now we get the strings are not equal. All right, so you can start seeing how this is falling out through here. So if these are not equal, so boom, didn't work. Because again, str1 is not this one. So if I change this, for example, to str2, and let's go ahead and put hello. All right, the strings are equal to the word hello. So it's, again, just how we test this, how we set this up is going to affect different things. And that is, of course, getting us some good comfort with working with strings here for how we compare them. And you may have to play around with this just to get comfortable. But again, the biggest thing you need to keep track of is just knowing that this is using the dot equals method and not equals equals, because notice nowhere in here are we using equals equals to test this. In fact, if I were to try and say string 1 equals equals string 2, and take the extra parenthesis out there, you'll notice it doesn't give me an error, all right? But if I try to run that, all right, we could run into some issues here, and we'll talk about this more later why. The biggest thing is it has to do with how this is referencing in memory. But right now, this is not the way we want to go about doing this. So don't do an equal sign. Instead, keep to using the equals method when you're comparing strings.